Morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the special meeting this morning. At this time, if you will, we'll have a moment of silent prayer and then we'll do the pledge of allegiance. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all.
Discussion items, Mr. Miller.
Commissioners, the first thing we have on the agenda this morning is the Department of Social Services staffing. As many of you know, most of you know, we have had an issue with DSS staffing as of late. We had 2 resignations from the department, leaving 0 social worker positions in foster care. Having said that, DSS struggles with recruitment and not necessarily retention. Both of these employees were long-time employees and very valuable employees, so DSS does struggle with recruitment. Some of those issues are due to just the nature of the work. A lot of the DSS work is hard. It's emotionally draining. It's tough work. Some of the other issues do relate to salary compression, and what surrounding agencies are offering. One of the social workers that recently resigned took a position in the school system, and I believe increased her salary by about $8,000 when she left. Both of our recent resignations listed more time with family, more time at home as causes for them wanting to leave DSS work. One is going into social work in the school system, which provides them with the summers off, more time with their children after work. The other employee that's leaving is leaving to become a kindergarten teacher in Person County. And again, has small children and it will allow them to be with their children. So I've met with the board members that represent the Board of Commissioners on the DSS board, Commissioner Owens, Commissioner Jeffrey. I've also met with Diane, the DSS director. And together, I think we've come up with a couple of theory or a couple of options that would help DSS. One is to increase those salaries that Diane is having problems recruiting, regrading those salaries by 2 grades. Usually when we move positions, we move 2 grades. If you have a social worker 1, there's 2 grades between a social worker 1 and a social worker 2 in most instances, not all instances, but most. And the same thing with income maintenance caseworker and administrative assistant 1, 2, and 3. You usually have 2 grades. So what we're proposing is we adjust and regrade some of these positions, those 2 grades, which will amount to a little bit over an 8% increase for those affected employees. The total that it would cost is about $120,000 if you just target those positions. Now, having said that, that $120,000 is the full increase. The state pays, and the state and the federal government pay about half of that salary So half of that salary increase would be, you could subtract about half of that salary increase due to the federal and state payments. So I'm happy to, that's one of the options we're suggesting. And this may take a two-pronged approach. We're also suggesting that the board look at adding 2 additional positions. I know we're having trouble recruiting these positions, but if we add 2 more positions and make those positions more, let's call them nighttime, on call, second shift, however you want to refer to them. That will alleviate some of the stress on the current social workers we have, because they'll know at 5 o'clock, they can leave, go home, be with their families, take care of their children, and do the things that most other county employees are afforded to do. It's no secret that in social services work that you'll have a steady string of calls between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, things that have to be handled. And social workers tend to end up working till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night because of those kind of situations. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Our director of DSS, Diane Moorfield, she's here with me this morning. We're happy to answer any questions the board may have.
I don't have a question, but I think it's imperative this board understands as well that if we're going to have to do something. Now, we cannot do any more positions, but we're going to have to contract services. And I think we need to understand what the cost of that would be.
Yep.
For Castle County government, if we have to contract service, because we have got to do something.
So if you contract services just for those 3 positions that DSS needs to fill in foster care, you contract those positions, you times that out by the number of hours normally worked by a social worker in a year. And above our normal costs, over and above our normal costs, we're looking at about $197,000 a year. And that's, once again, that's over and above our normal salary costs.
Are you anticipating these other 2 positions? Is it an either or situation? Or do we need to add these 2 plus the upgrades in the?
I don't believe it's an either or. I think that's the best case scenario. You can increase the salaries. I think that's where the board probably needs to start. If we're not competitive with neighboring counties and school systems and so on and so forth, we're not going to be able to recruit new employees into the agency. The problem with recruitment is currently we can't set our goal on recruiting brand new, fresh out of school social worker. And Diane may be able to explain this far better than I can. But when you recruit a social worker straight out of school, they have to come into the agency, take some additional required training, spend time in the field with other social workers that we don't have to send them out with. Maybe we have a supervisor we can send them out with. But before they can ever begin home visits themselves. So we're still stuck in the same position as we are right now. I think the flip side of that is we need to be able to recruit seasoned social workers into those positions to where we don't have to go through that initially. We don't have to go through that training. If we recruit new social workers to the field, we're still going to have to contract, and correct me anytime I'm wrong, Diane. We're still going to have to contract with these agencies to bring people in and send our social workers, the new ones, out into the field with the ones we contract with to get the experience they need to be able to operate in that environment. There's also requirements on DSS that each and every foster child has to be seen once a month, face to face. At least once a month. We have children from South Carolina, or have had children from South Carolina to Virginia, to Asheville, to the coast. And when a social worker has to travel like that, that cuts a complete day out of that cycle. Out of the monthly cycle that they've got to see those children. So if that doesn't happen, we look at a loss of revenue from the state. We potentially look at fines and things like that. And all that's important. All of that is really important. But the most important thing is that these kids get taken care of the way they should be taken care of. That our aging adults that are in DSS care get taken care of the way they should be taken care of. It's so important that our residents, the ones that count on our DSS workers, get taken care of on a daily basis. That kind of overshadows everything else.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Go ahead.
What is the, if I heard you correctly, you're gonna want to recruit seasoned social workers. How are we going to recruit seasoned social workers when our salary is still, even if we raise it, still not comparable to other areas? Why would they come from one area to our area to, I guess, take less salary? I mean, where's the motive for them?
Well, if we raise those salaries, I believe we'll be competitive. We're not going to be above, but we'll be competitive with other areas, other surrounding counties and other areas in the state. I think the key to social work, us being able to attract social workers, is this second shift, if you will. Having this second shift, and I don't know the inner workings of DSS, so I can't explain to you how that would work. But having this second shift available to where when DSS workers hit 5 o'clock in the evening, they know they're going to be able to go home. They know that they're going to be able to see their families, to provide dinner for them that night. I think that's the selling point. It's the time with their families. The reason we're seeing our social workers now leave, it's a way to fix that to some degree.
I have another question. These after hours, is that going to be, are we looking at like contract services, or are we looking at an actual position?
I would imagine positions.
So
It would be much cheaper to add positions.
So we're talking about 4 positions. Right? Your two regular social workers.
No. And let me preface all this by saying, you're talking about adding 2 additional positions. Okay. I gave you on the papers you have in front of you, I gave you social worker 2 and income maintenance caseworker 1. I gave you an evaluation of what state and like counties as compared to Caswell are for those positions, right? This would apply to income maintenance caseworker 1s, 2s, and 3s. Because a lot of times to get 2 to 3, you got to go through 1 and 2. It would also apply to social worker 1, 2, and 3 to keep that two, and supervisors as well, to keep that 2-grade separation between those, that in some instances, Mindy, and you might be able to speak more to this than I can, but in some instances, the state requires.
We have 2 positions already that we just don't have filled.
But you want them to upgrade
Yeah,
those 2
three.
positions.
Upgrade the salary,
Right.
right?
And then add 2 positions.
Okay, so my next question would be, let me see, I want to get it worded right. So after hours, is every social worker really, or is every social worker on call?
Yes,
So this social worker may have this child, they get a call, they have to go. And this social worker may get a different child, get a call, and they still have to go out, but both of them would still go out.
right now we do have on-call workers, but if we get a call at 5 o'clock or 5:15, 5:30, and it's a case that the social worker is involved in, then 9 times out of 10, the social worker will try to address the issue because they have the history with the child or the adult. So it's a team effort depending on the particular situation.
And if I'm not mistaken, Diana, please correct me if I'm wrong. On, maybe I should say, I was thinking that maybe this would cut down on some of the on-call pay that you provide to your employees now for having them on call for maybe new calls, right? You have social workers that are on call for a week at a time. Is that correct?
Yes, every social worker is required to participate in on-call and they do a week at a time. It rotates as to who's on call. So they get, right now, they just get a flat stipend for being on call. But if they actually have to go out, they get comp time. And I have workers with mountains of comp time. But because of the situation we're in, they can't take the comp time, they can't use the comp time because it doesn't slow down. And I've got staff that have 150 hours comp time. I've got staff that have more than that comp time, but they can't take it if they're short staffed. So it's. What we're gonna use for.
So can I understand this a little bit better? We're talking about changing the grade level of 2 social work titles or people in classes.
It's not just 2.
No, it's more than 2.
2 positions to. You're talking about changing the income maintenance caseworker 1. You're talking about changing that salary or that grade to a 65.
Yeah,
Correct?
yes, but
And
there's
that
also,
involves X number of people.
but there's also income maintenance caseworkers 2s and 3s that would be affected as well.
That's not on here.
No, because I gave you the evaluation. And the data is not there for income maintenance caseworkers 2s and 3s. It's only there for 1s, just like social worker 1s and 3s that we currently have are not provided by the UMC School of Government. So I gave you the valuation that I could put my hands on.
So there's a domino effect here.
There is, and the domino effect goes from social work or income maintenance caseworker 1, 2s, 3s, social worker 1s, 2s, and 3s, and supervisors for both of those classes.
Okay, and that is the net impact of $100,000 change. What was that number?
It's $120,000, and there's a social worker 1 A&T position that it also affects. Social worker 3, social worker 2, income maintenance caseworker supervisor. social workers 1, 2, and 3. And there's social work supervisors, 3s that it would affect.
All right, but that number is $120,000. However, we don't have people in all those positions already.
That's correct.
You got, most of those positions are open, unfortunately.
That's correct. And when we say it's $120,000, it is $120,000, but the state pays 50% of that, or roughly 50%, the state and the federal government. So in actuality, our share of the portion of cost is about $60,000.
Now, you're talking about adding to, for one of the better words, let's just call them evening employees that work second shift.
That's correct.
That's 2 of those positions. And those would be what on this scale?
Ultimately, they would be social worker 3s. So the cost to the county to add 2 positions would be about $58,000 a year, $116,000 a year total. But again, half of those salaries are paid by state and federal funds.
So that's 58,000 to the county. Right.
58,000 to the 60,000.
Right. And does that include benefits, retirement,
Yes,
whole package?
yes,
So what we're talking about is around $110,000 potential, well, or authorized impact.
that's correct. And so in a perfect world, we're going to do the exact right thing, and we're going to have people flock to DSS to make application, and Diane's going to be able to find 5 wonderful social workers within the next week.
Now,
I'm willing to bet that's not going to happen here. So
to follow up, I think a little bit on Commissioner Owens' question, these second shift, to expand on what county manager said, if, for example, social worker heading out the door at 5 o'clock and the call comes in for one of their cases, would that call be transferred to, or that responsibility be transferred to the second shift worker? Or would the primary social worker still have to go out on that call?
The information that I've looked at from other counties, it's like the second shift, the on-call staff actually report to work before the end of the 5 o'clock workday. They are already on board. So if anything comes in, it's a group like staffing, the case is staff, and decisions are made as to whether it meets the legal requirement of a child protective service report, adult protective services report, and there's a plan put into place as to who gets assigned. So then the on-call staff that we have would be the ones to actually go out in the county and respond and take care of it. Whereas the social workers that have been there all day don't have to go back out and spend another 5 or 6 hours working after their.
Okay, so what you're saying is that call would be passed to that second shift in most cases.
Yes.
So it would, in fact, relieve the workload, the evening workload on the daytime.
Yes,
That's an absolute, that's the way it would work.
that's the way it would be
That's the way you envision it.
implemented, yes.
Thank you. Sorry to make everybody go through that, but it was a little confusing.
Yeah. And it gives me 2 more things here. First of all,
I'm even sorrier now.
They would come into work, correct? They would be in the building.
Yes, I mean, they would
They will
be,
be, okay, so here's where I'm going with that is. if they get no calls, what are they gonna be doing?
They would still be on standby. They would still be available to go. They could also, in the meantime, when we have to do our face-to-face contacts with all of our foster children, or if we have to go out on an adult protective services case, they can be utilized to assist with visiting those foster children or bringing in, coming in on an adult protective services situation. So there are other tasks that they can do while they are at work.
All right, maybe I didn't get the question out what I'm looking for. Let's back up. Tell me how many calls we get during the day to go out compared to evening to go out? Do you have any statistics on that?
I looked at those numbers and I'm not sure I brought that with me because we were concerned with, looking at just some additional assistance on the weekend. But what I learned in looking at the number of reports that we're getting just as many reports after 5 o'clock during the week as we are on the weekend. So there's really not a slow time because 9 times out of 10, at 5, 5:15, 5:30, the phones ring. Those calls after 5 are generally routed through the sheriff's department. And then the sheriff's department contacts us to let us, then we have to call the person that's trying to reach us to make a report. But when I looked at the numbers, I was really surprised that the on-call numbers don't change much between the week and the weekend. We have just as many during the week as we do on the weekend, the on-call responses that we have.
What kind of numbers are you talking about during the week?
That's what I didn't bring with me, but we were looking at, we were looking at 20, 30, up. It varies. I mean, there's some weeks that we were getting 50. I mean, it was just a very wide variety, but there was something every single day of the week.
That's day and night combined,
I'm talking about like after 5,
after 5.
when the calls come in.
It's
after
20,
5.
20 to 50 after 5.
Yes, I mean, when you look at the big picture, yes, it's not,
How about during the day?
we're getting almost as many during the day. But what I find is a lot of people that are required to make reports to us, at the end of their workday, they're thinking, oh my goodness, I was supposed to call social services. So when they're ending their workday is when most of the time they call us, and that's at the end of our workday. Except if it's late in the day when they call to make it. And then we have requirements for the time we have to respond to those. Depending on the severity of the information. Some are immediate. Some are 12 hours. Some are 24 hours. 36 hours. It just depends on the nature of the report.
Diane, do you feel like you would have trouble recruiting for those positions? I know those are not desirable hours to have.
I think there would be some challenge, but I think that a lot of our surrounding counties already have staff that do this. And I mean, it suits some people's work schedule.
Right.
Some people prefer that.
Would it be an option to rotate the schedule between social workers where they work some daytime shifts and then the next pay period they work?
Well, I think the largest incentive for somebody to work the second shift schedule like that, I think is a shift premium that's added to that salary and increases the salary, $4,000 or $5,000 a year. Like you see in a lot of places that offer shift work, first, second, third shift work, there's always a shift premium involved with the work, and I think that's the incentive.
Forgive me, I'm trying to play catch up a little bit here on this delay, but is the total cost in front of you what you're talking about for the pay restructuring and the additional staff? Am I getting that would be roughly $238,000?
No,
Well, total it would be, but what we
Okay.
get back would be about 50% of that from the state and federal.
Total for the pay, state federal comes in, it's 238, and the county's paying for roughly half.
And who would work on who would be on call, work on the weekends? You got these workers that are there after hours, how the weekend stuff.
Right now, we have all social workers are required to participate in their own call system. So if something comes in after hours or on the weekend, our current social workers have to respond to that. And we would still look at how to sort of mesh the two. Some of the social workers might,
To share the responsibility.
yes.
And losing two at one time. If you have a call coming in, you have calls, several calls, 20 calls come in this weekend, how you gonna handle that?
Well, actually, I'm short three. I have 3 social workers in foster care. One retired, so she's been gone. And then I was left with 2, and now both of those have resigned. So I'm down to 0. I've had meetings with the supervisor over foster care, and according to the state, she can bump back down to doing actual social work, but then I have to be her supervisor. So the supervisor has to become a social worker again, and I have to become a supervisor over the foster care.
So if you have 20 calls come in this weekend, that individual would have to handle them.
Plus in working with the on-call person, we'll pull in. And we've had a staff member who has offered her assistance. I met with her yesterday. She's offered to try to help us out in the foster care arena. The area she lives in, we have a number of foster children placed in that area. So she said she would be willing to visit those children that are local to her, which would be a nice help to us.
and just to reiterate one more time, the cost of us not doing anything and having to go with the placement service to provide workers to do this work for us is $197,000 over and above what we would, the salaries that you're seeing.
And just a clarification on that, of which we would not get any refund on, correct? Would we get anything from the state or federal government through placement services? No, I just asking that question at this point. Yeah, that's what I assumed.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just wondered about that.
The work that they do, we have to document, we do day sheets. So we list the child's name and we list whatever the activity is that we're doing. We would get some reimbursement on the particular services for the child,
Right,
like we do,
right.
but there would still be the extra cost for them. And those, the company that we looked at is very expensive.
Yes.
Clarify for me, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Clarify for me, 197,000. A little more detail on what that would be encompassing as far as what they were doing for that figure. Is that talking about placement of kids in the foster care position? But I kind of missed the breakdown of what that was. If we don't do anything, so
So, we would contract with an agency that could provide us workers. And when they provided us those workers, they said hourly rates. The hourly rates equate to about $107,000 a year for each one of those employees. And when you do the math, it comes up to about $197,000 over and above the salaries that we would be paying and getting half back for. So there's about $197,000 difference. Now, and when I say $197,000, that's salary. We also have to pay those agency provided people lodging, travel, meals. Anything else, Diane? Lodging, travel, meals.
Those are the main expenses.
So it's 197 plus those expenses.
This company is based out of Wilson. And so we have to pay the workers mileage to come here to work for us. We have to cover any and all expenses that they have. We have to provide them office space. We have to provide them with all the equipment they need. So there's a lot that goes into paying that, and their hourly rate is double and triple what we would normally be looking at paying staff.
It's true.
And that's if there would be somebody available willing to come to Castle.
Mr. Chairman,
Oops, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I like to think that we would take a more holistic approach at solving this problem. Some of the things that I've heard out of question period. So there's no need of us talking about contracting with somebody for $200,000-300,000, whatever the number's gonna be, to fill 2 positions till we can recruit. That's out of the question. We could spend all morning talking about kind of options and possibilities. Since I've been on this board, we've had at least 3 issues that we tried to deal with on a departmental basis, and it didn't work. First, it was inspection. Inspection department. Every time we hear that the inspector was going to leave, we try to deal with it by raising the salary. Then the sheriff's department. Sheriff's department can't recruit. Well, we'll try to raise their salary. Health department, dealing with nurses, can't get nurses. We have to try to raise individual salaries. We've got to take a holistic approach. The holistic approach to me is raise all salaries. Quit sitting here with our head in the sand, talking about how much it's going to cost the county. We need to look at how much it's going to cost the county to be competitive in the region. We can talk about how poor we are, but we're not that poor. We're just using that as an excuse. We're poor because we're not creative and because we're not doing the things we need to do to raise additional money. And I'll just use this as a kind of example. We are very, very poor, but everybody in this county that wants an F-150 pickup truck gets one. Everybody who wants to do any kind of name pickup truck gets one because they are creative and they've got their priorities. This board has to get creative and get its priorities. Our priorities should be to become competitive in the region, period. And we just can't try to fix these issues department by department because they don't work. They haven't worked in the last 20 years that I've been around, and they're not going to work. We're just fooling ourselves. So what does that mean to me? That means we need to look at finding the money, raising the money, doing whatever it takes with economic development or whatever to get this county so they can afford to be competitive. And we haven't done that. We haven't even tried to do that.
Mr. Nightingale?
Yes, sir. Diane, when we were in our budget session, month or so ago, you indicated to us you had 5 unfilled positions, but yet you were asking for another position. Have you filled any of those 5 positions that you had then?
I have filled a few of those positions, but I also now have some new vacant positions. Right now, I have 9 vacancies.
You have 9 vacancies. So technically and theoretically, in your budget, you have the monies already budgeted for you for the 51 positions we budgeted for. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then why can't, if you've got 9, why can't we, instead of giving you 2 more positions, why couldn't you use that monies to, I'm trying to stop something in perpetuity of continuing to add positions year after year, when the money's already there for you to spend, but yet you can't find the people to spend it on.
Well, I do have the funding for my current staff, my current positions. I have that in my budget. So these 2 positions would be new positions that are not covered. And we do use, when we have vacancies, that money stays in the budget. So the money is there.
That's correct. That's what I'm saying. The money's there. Why are we creating new positions to add more monies when the monies is actually already there?
But
If you fill all 9 positions, then you can say, okay, I filled all these 9 positions. Now let's talk about creating 2 more. But you've already got the monies appropriated for you.
yeah, so we did that with 2 positions during budget. And I understand exactly what you're saying, Commissioner Massengill. The problem being is the Board of Commissioners creates positions. We cannot create those positions on our own. So to do what you're suggesting, first of all, the board would have to create those positions. And unless you subtract 2 current positions, which I believe what I'm hearing the DSS director say is she needs those positions, right?
Yeah.
So she needs all of these positions. So it would always be this give and take. Any money that goes unspent in vacant positions goes back to fund balance at the end of the year, regardless.
Fully realize that. I'm just
Right.
trying to keep positions from being created that maybe won't be needed in perpetuity.
Yes, I understand.
I'm gonna echo what I've heard Mr. Massengill just bring to the floor. I've been sitting here trying to soak up the whole discussion. And if we have a department that's running with 9 open positions, asking 2 more, I think logically, if they need those 2 on the night and the calls are coming in, I understand that need for that to happen. But in a perfect world, we could wave a magic wand and we would be able to provide money across the board. And I heard a comment made that everybody can drive a F-150 pickup. There's plenty of money in this county. There are a lot of people struggling. I got an F-150 pickup. It's about 23 years old. I mean, these work all the time. I can't afford to just pull more money out of the air. If we're going to add the 2 positions, I think we ought to cut 2 of the 9 open positions to be able to justify that. And that's the way I feel about it.
And I would agree to a certain extent, but what we have to realize is all those 9 positions she needs. So if we cut 2 of those positions and all of a sudden she has filled those other 7 and has got 2 more she needs, then my fear is the board would say, well, no, we're not gonna add any more positions. So we would be taken away. That would be my fear, that the board would then say, well, no, we're not gonna have it. So I think the board would have to realize that that's the direction we go. That if she comes back and for miracle takes place and she hires and she's got those 2 extra that she needs to hire, that the board would need to reinstate those positions.
Yeah, I'd like to reply to that. But first, I would like to hear the number of positions that are open, excluding the ones that recently quit. How long have you had open positions in your office?
Recently, I keep open positions, but they have shifted somewhat in terms of I've brought in several new people. And then several others have turned around and then resigned or left and accepted other positions. So it's not like I have the same vacancies I had two years ago or even last year. I am filling some vacancies and then I'm having new vacancies that are occurring.
Well, I would counter with, we're done, I didn't mean to cut you off, sir. I would counter with this, if you've got the open vacancies, and to Mr. Owens' point in bringing up that future times, if you fill them all, I'm going back to what you said earlier. If we add 2 positions on an evening shift, that they could be utilized in taking part of the workload that regularly was done on the daytime shift into their area of responsibility. So that would alleviate some of the workload you have on your office during the regular hours, which I would counter would equate to needing less staff. I still think adding the 2 in the evening and taking away 2 in the day would be a happy medium, and then correct the pay discrepancies within the department to enable you to recruit more people. That would cut the county's cost on this whole proposed project in half right off the bat. And then maybe some people in the county could afford to go buy those F-150 pickup trucks if they want.
So,
My first comment was that I think we need to take a holistic approach. And taking a holistic approach means we need to look at both sides. If we've got 9 vacancies, the other side of it is what is the cost to the citizens of Caswell County? What are they giving up because of those 9 vacancies? Not giving up, what are they not getting? What are we not getting? And we haven't talked about that. There's something missing. If somewhere down the line, this board approved these positions, we had to believe they were needed. We believe they were needed, somebody convinced us that they were needed. If they did that, then something is lost somewhere. The citizens are not getting something. And what is that something? And that's why I said the holistic approach. Now, again, we've been here 45 minutes on this one subject. And we can ask all kinds of questions and we can give our opinions, but we need to know all the facts. And all of the facts are, what are the citizens losing?
May I say one other thing that sort of addresses one of the issues that's been discussed here? When I look at my staff, I've got staff that right now have 147 hours of comp time. I have staff that have 103 hours of comp time, 187 hours of comp time. The work is being done, but at a cost to my staff, because in addition to working their full-time jobs, they've got 160 hours of comp time that they worked over and above the normal 40-hour work week. So the work is getting done, but it's getting done at the expense of the staff that I have who are having to work weekends, who are having to be at the hospital emergency room all night with a foster child For 2 weekends straight, they spent 2 weekends in emergency departments and hospitals. The hours are adding up. The workers are burning out. That's why they're leaving to go to the school system where they can work during the day and they can go home and not be worried about having to turn right around and come back to work, having to spend the night on a cot in the social services agency. I borrowed cots. I have cots at the office for staff to be able to at least rest their head on or give the child a cot to sleep on. These are the faces of social services that not everybody sees or knows about. My staff are not accumulating 180 hours of overtime because they choose to do that. It's their job. It is the expectation. And they know that we have local, state, and federal mandates, legal mandates that we have to meet, whatever that looks like. So I will have a foster care supervisor who will now become a foster care worker. I will also become another supervisor to the foster care unit because that's a mandate. We are not allowed to double dip and overlap. I mean, they will not allow the supervisor to be the social worker and oversee herself. So I come back into the picture and I'm happy to do that. If that's what it takes to get us through this time we're in. I've never seen anything like it. People used to stand in line for a job at social services or any other county agency. I mean, we have these vacancies not for any fault of their own. All counties are experiencing this sort of same scenario. But I can never have hope of filling my positions if we're going to pay so much less than the neighboring counties. I mean, I'm fighting a losing battle. And in the meantime, I'm losing some of the best employees I've ever had. Years of experience. Because they have their children at home, but they're spending their days and their nights in a hospital emergency room with foster children because that's what their job requires. And they do what is expected. So I'm going to continue to lose my qualified best help because I can't continue this work schedule forever. They can't do it. And I've never thought I'd see the day I'd be in a situation where I had 0 foster care social workers. I've never in my wildest dreams thought that would happen. But it doesn't mean we don't still have to do the job. The state and federal government tell us what we have to do, and we will do it.
Just to add, you finish?
It's
Just to add something to that, we heard a lot of us discussing money and payroll. The director haven't had enough staff, they got enough staff there to work overtime. That's why the job is getting done. When they burn out, you know what you're gonna do then. You're gonna pay the state, we're gonna pay. If we don't meet the deadline, it's gonna come out of county budget, no matter where you go. When you don't say, yeah, think that we doing good, we doing good because what people working overtime, you heard the top time pay. So it's this both the one got me to suggest what we need to do. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to make that motion, but I think we need to make a motion to go ahead and continue the 2 active persons. That's a motion on the table. We can do it.
Have one more comment or question before we do the motion. I didn't realize you were going to close with that soon. Ms. Morehill, when this comp time is being built up, would not the 2 additional positions being added in the evening greatly alleviate that since you have staffing? So by adding those positions, again, it would take workload off the daytime hours. They would not be accruing the comp time as they are. If we increase the pay to your department to attract more qualified candidates, I still see no reason not to be able to remove 2 of your 9 positions in a day and add them to 9 positions and at least cut half of this cost to the county. The reality is, yes, we've got to do something, but there's also a reality of this board has a track record one time after another, whether it was in budget process there at the end, adding extra positions. And I believe some of those were in your department. It's always a constant drumbeat of more and more costs being added to our obligations as a county. And that bill will come due sooner or later. It's going to fall back on the taxpayers. We're heading for a recession. We're going to have problems out of people being able to pay their taxes in the future. And we do not need to just keep spending money like it's water coming out of the faucet. There is some kind of balance of sensibility that must be instilled here. And if we don't start doing that, it's going to be hell to pay for all of us when the bill comes. We're going to have to jack taxes up. I'm done.
Mr. Chairman, I would be for the new positions, not call new positions, by using the already budgeted money, and if and when, as they've expressed some trepidation that they fill all 9 positions, they come back and say all 9 positions are filled. And here's where we are. I realize the impact on the children. And in my opinion, the children are the most important part of DSS's services, that and the elderly. Understand that perfectly because of the business I'm in. However, I just, again, adding positions when you've got 9 budgeted positions and the money's there, realizing the money goes into fund balance, I'm just a little leery of that being there. Are we going to vote on this today, or are we going to ask maybe the county manager to come back and with what I'm hearing is it's not necessarily the money that's the issue, it's the burnout factor is the issue. And I'd really like to know how many, not necessarily DSS, but in this specific case, DSS, I'd really like to know how many counties have this same issue and how they tackled it. I haven't heard a really good explanation of how anybody's tackled this problem, if in fact it's all over.
What I'll say, Commissioner Massengill, is I think you're right. And there is a way we can do this. If the board adds the positions, forgets about the funding, but adds the positions to where Diane can hire them, but we just don't move the line item for salaries above what it currently is, that will allow Diane to hire those positions. And when and if we have applicants to fill all the vacancies, or we start hitting that line item balance, we'll just have to come back to the board.
And I would, again, that's not going to put any extra burden or take any money out of fund balance. I would agree with that 100%, realizing that we would have to come, but if I've understood what I've understood, very few departments, most of them turn in fund balance at the end of the year because of personnel matters that they didn't have positions filled.
That's correct. That is correct. The other part to your question, Commissioner Massengill, is what are other counties doing about this? I think all counties are struggling with it. And you see other counties reacting to it in much the same way we're asking you to react to it. And that's by increasing salaries to become more competitive in the labor market and try to attract and recruit those new candidates to this position.
They've also
Do-
contracted.
And-
Do
and
other,
And
do
some
other,
counties have contracted for services.
okay, do other counties have this weekend and night positions? If so, how many calls do, and maybe this, I'm sure you don't know the answer to this question. It would just be relevant to me. How many calls does in like counties, not Alamance or Orange or something, but in like counties, do they have these weekend positions, I'll call them? And if so, what are their responsibilities? And if so, how many calls do they have during the nighttime or now if they're weekends, if they're Saturday or Sunday and they work 12, 14, how many hours they're going to work, that's still going to leave your nighttime positions unfilled or on call for your other people. So I'm not sure quite how that's going to work hour wise.
I understand. And I have full faith and confidence in our DSS director that she understands that, because that's her responsibility to understand it. It's her responsibility to manage that department. And it's the DSS board's responsibility to oversee the operations of that department. So when it comes to how and what, I think it's up to the DSS director and the DSS board to figure that out. I think what we've heard the DSS director say is that her employees receive numerous calls between 4:30 and 5:30 in the afternoon that require them to stay till 8, 9, 10 o'clock, or maybe even all night. Some of that, you're right, may not be able to be alleviated because there's only so many hours in the day, and 2 additional positions probably will not be able to cover that entire time. But I believe Diane would be able to figure that out. If you need some additional data, we can reach out and see if we can retrieve that. We're happy to do that. I do know Person County has a similar, Person is not one of our like counties, but it's one of our neighboring counties. They have a similar arrangement for their DSS department, to where they have people that work on call.
So
Did you say where they work on call?
Or they work after hours or second shift, or whatever you'd like to call that arrangement.
Okay, so they're in their office doing work other than at home, just waiting for the phone to ring?
Yes, they have a variety of assignments. I mean, we get a lot of courtesy requests to go out and do for another county or another state, to go out and visit a home. We do things like that. They assist with some of the visits for some of the foster children. They have a variety of tasks. They're very flexible in the things they can be, the tasks they can accomplish. So.
Okay, I would like, this is just my preference, I would like to see some data on like counties. Just for my sake, whether we vote today or not, I'd like to see some data on like counties.
Absolutely, we'll gather that for you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask Commissioner Jeffries if he would amend the motion that he made to include this, that we approve the grade increases that have been requested. And we would add the 2 after-hour positions with no increase in the salary line budget of DSS at this time.
So you're.
We would do the grade increases. We would allow her to go ahead, and if she can find after-hour workers, but there would be no increase in her salary line in her budget at this time.
Just go in there. Wait, Mr. Gill.
We get that, we get a second, we come in and says, what's
I'm trying to, before we make a second, I want to make a comment about the motion, something I want to hear that. Before we get to that. You're trying to settle what the motion is at this point.
Yeah, I'm asking him to amend what he,
But before we have a second on that, I want to follow up on something you said. Are you saying by not increasing the salary cap and adding these two positions? That's an answer here temporarily, but that leaves the door wide open for all 9 of those positions being filled and increase the funds to cover those in future days. So all we're doing is kicking the can down the road. I would counter that I'd like to see that motion include cutting 2 of the open position, adding this position. That we get to the point on the other line where 9 additional positions are needed in the health department, that they come to this board to add those 2 positions back.
I'm gonna leave the motion like it is for this reason. That money is never spent if those positions are not added. So if she only hires 7 more additional people, there's not an additional dollar that goes into her line item. But now, if there are 2 more positions she needs that are in there, then she would have to come and ask the board because her line item for salaries is there.
I understand that you've got a temporary stopgap there, but to the commissioner's comment, I forget who said it earlier, this repeated adding of positions, at some point in time, we got to think it through to what something looks like in the future. I still counter. I would not support this unless we're going to do away with 2 of the 9 to add these 2.
We're not adding 2 positions. We're not adding 2 positions.
You are adding 2 on second shift, correct? There will be 2 people hired.
She's gonna hire those out of her 9 budget salary.
Right. But
Those
you
9
still,
vacancies.
okay, all right, let's do the math. You got 9, you're gonna add these 2, it's gonna be 11 total right there.
Not if she doesn't hire the 9.
But she still has the ability to hire the 9, she's got to come back and ask for the additional money to hire any above that.
She'll have to come back and ask for additional money.
So
But then we can say yes or no to the extra position she's asking.
Yes.
Right.
It's a band-aid.
Well, we've got to do something. We've spent $250,000 on these, the special, going out and contracting this. Well, that's a lot more money than what we're asking for here. We're not asking for any increase. So I made the motion. We get a second.
Mr. Chairman, could I just make
Yes.
a brief comment? I think Diane made a very eloquent point that some people may have not heard or ignored or didn't fit in with their preconceived notions. But when she's talking about the comp time that's being run, that clearly says there isn't time being misspent or not utilized. Look at that comp time. Those are actual people working the job. So if a person's running up 180 hours with a comp time, that means they're doing the work of 2 people. They're spending 2 people's time. So you can talk about people, empty positions and unfilled positions. What's happening is the existing people are filling those positions at their personal expense. So I think, I don't see how anybody can overlook that fact here. And I don't see how anybody can deny what we need to do with the amended motion. And therefore I second the motion as amended.
All right, we got a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, yes. I'm not overlooking the comp time, but I did not hear a time frame that comp time was received in. So I'm not sure that's one person's doing the work of 2 in a week's period, but go ahead.
The comment is right along in line with what Commissioner Maxfield was saying. No one's overlooking the comp time, but we're adding 2 positions on the off hours to make it possible for the 9 to 5 people or 8 to 5 people to be able to go home. That's gonna cut down on a lot of this comp time being built up because you've got 2 full-time people, staff to cover that. And that's what some commissioners in here seem to be overlooking. So I think in reverting back to what Commissioner Massengill said, if we could see the actual hours where they were being accrued and what was going on, we wouldn't be having this back and forth over it because we could know where all this was being picked up at and whether or not these 2 additional positions would indeed take that workload off of our current workforce and thereby decrease the need for 9 positions in the office to continue on.
Mr. Chairman, I call the question.
We have a motion, Mr. Hall.
Yes, I don't see this, what we're proposing as a holistic approach. I don't see us looking at both sides of the problem. Now, the director did make some very good comments that hit on the other side, she talked about what it's costing staff, but she still didn't talk about what it's costing citizens. And that's where I think we need to do some type of holistic approach to dealing with this issue. Now, Commissioner Owen said, we gotta do something. I don't want to take that literally, but doing something is not the answer. We need to take an approach that will at least have a chance of settling the problem for all departments in Castle County.
And I would reply to that, and I agree 100%. And we had an opportunity to do that when we had a salary plan presented to us that this board said, whoa, we can't spend $1 million and some dollars. We had that opportunity to help in all our departments, but we chose to go with the 90%, which is fine. That helps. That's great. You know, so I would just offer some.
We have a motion, second on the floor. All those in favor by roll call voting, Mr. Dickerson?
No.
Mr. Hall?
No,
Mr. Jeffries?
Yes.
Mr. Owen?
Aye.
Mr. Ostrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Massengill?
Yes.
McVeigh, yes. Motion carries. Moving on.
Now-
Mr. Massengill,
No, I had a little bit of mess up here. David, let me ask you, your motion was no, not going over the budgeted amount. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, then fine. Yes, thanks. Sorry.
moving on, economic development job description, Mr. Miller.
Commissioners, I've provided you, thank you. I've provided you with an economic development job description. I've also provided you with a redlined economic development job description that both includes recruitment and to address Commissioner Hall's point frame. So in the redline job description, those are both addressed, but this is an opportunity for the board to discuss this. And if, you know, we'll take what the board discusses and implement it into the job description. If there's anything not in here that you wish to see in here, we can certainly go through and add it. Commissioner Massengill, did you receive that through email, the red line version?
I did, sir. Went over it. Looks really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just appears to me that we covered the issue that was not in it before. I'm good.
I have a observation I'd like to throw out for consideration. See on desired education experience. Is that to mean that it had someone that had experience in the field that was equal to or above educational degrees, that they would be as qualified as someone that had a college degree?
Yes. So where it says, or an equivalent combination of education and experience, that allows for longtime professionals or professionals in the field that do not have necessarily the degree to apply for the job and be in consideration. And if I'm not mistaken, we had that on most of our job application or job description.
We do standard state.
Do you need a consensus or anything on this?
Well, the board said that they wanted to discuss it. So I would like a consensus from the board and, we'll get it posted Monday, right? Can we get it posted today? I know that may be a little bit much to ask because
We probably could.
that'll give anybody looking over the weekend time.
I don't see why we can't do.
All right, you need a consensus. Mr. Dickerson,
Trying to scan this first paragraph.
I'll come back to you. How
All
about
right,
that?
that'll be fine.
Always put on that side. Mr. Howell. Mr. Jeffries.
Yes.
Mr. Owens not back yet. Mr. Ostrich. Yep. Mr. Massengale.
Yes, it did everything in the recruitment stage that I think the county needs. I think Brian did a really nice job on putting this together. Marketing, it had that in there. It had branding in there. I was real pleased with the way this came out. Yes.
Mr. Owens.
Yes.
Mr. Bay, yes. Consensus. You got it. Mr. Dickerson, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson went along with it. You got consensus.
Thank you.
Community Service Block Grant Advisory Council.
So commissioners, we need a community service block grant advisory council representative from the board.
Everybody jump up at one time.
You got to tell us what that is, please.
It's the Telemon Cooperation. They've presented at one of the meetings before. They do the workforce and career services
Head Start.
and Head Start. So they need a county commissioner on their board.
You raise your hand.
Do they need a county commissioner or will staff work?
They want a county commissioner.
I would do it, Mr. Chairman, but I'm going out in December, so.
Commissioners, one of the things you might want to consider is nominating a commissioner to fill that role, but nominating also an alternate. We do have an employee that seems to be very well versed in that area. Her name's Aisha Gwynn. She's assistant county manager. She also oversees family services, and she's getting a master's degree in that area. She may be a great alternate for that board.
Just tell that board that she's way smarter than any of us and she's the one.
Can we do that? Do you need a motion on that or consensus or?
You usually vote on it.
All right, somebody make the motion. Mr. Massengale.
I made a motion that Aisha Gwynn is the person to represent the commissioners on the board.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any more discussion? If not, we'll do roll call voting. Mr. Dickerson. Mr. Howell. Mr. Jeffries. Mr. Owen. Mr. Ostrich. Mr. Massengale.
Aye.
Mr. Bay, motion carries. I will accept a motion to go into closed session, please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to go into closed session, consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, condition of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee, which privilege is hereby acknowledged in CGS 143-318, period 11, parentheses A, parentheses C.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. Dickerson. Mr. Howell. Mr. Jeffries. Mr. Owen. Mr. Ostrogger. Mr. Massengill.
Aye.
Mr. Bay, motion carried. We will now sit in closed session.
We ready?
We're ready?
Yeah.
I'll entertain the motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Roll call voting. Mr. Dickerson. Mr. Howell. Mr. Jeffries. Mr. Owen. Mr. Ostrogger. Mr. Massengill.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bay, motion carried.